The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.
We got a couple of huge SEC games. Could Alabama and Georgia both be out after this week? And it's the week of the Smelly Fish. It is week 11 here. K4Wins.com. K4Wins.com is our website. Check it out. It is 24 hours a day. Free plays. K4Wins.com. And, of course, we have our four knuckleheads. I'm Tony Kurre. Of course, I've been doing sports radio forever. Kai Gregory is a master handicapper, works both sides of the streets, been doing it for about 30 or 40 years. Kip Keefer is the executive director at the Birmingham Racecourse and Casino, does fantastic work. And Case Keefer's son was a chief editor for the Las Vegas Sun, and this is what he does for a living. So we got four guys who kind of know what we're talking about, and we proved that by giving you the numbers from last week. How did we do last week, Kai?
18-10 last weekend.
All right.
Every single week so far, college, NFL, profitable side, 201, 110, and 7 for the year. 64%.
Wow. That's
unfathomable.
You put $100
let's
in
be honest.
Games,
That's not going to keep up. That just trend stat. But so far, so good. You know, we hope it keeps up. But that is rare in handicapping to be 64% at just about any time except maybe 1 week.
Okay, so we talk about it's a monster week, obviously, in the SEC with Georgia and Ole Miss. That line's really small. And, of course, Alabama playing at LSU on Saturday nights. And I know a lot of people are going, wow, how can Alabama only be a small favorite? I think the wrong team is favored here. But there are some smelly fish games I wanted to throw out from a Las Vegas style thing. And I'm just going to throw out the lines and what they're because a lot of people go, wait a minute, how can a team that is 8-0 like BYU only be favored by 3 over a Utah team that has lost their last 4 games? How is that a possibility? How can Army, who's 8-0, only be favored by 4 over a North Texas team that's 5-3? How could Iowa State, 7-1 in the year, be a 3-point favorite against a 2-6 Kansas, and finally a 6-3 Iowa squad who plays some of the ugliest ball in all the Big Ten and period in any college football, giving up 6.5 against a 3-5 UCLA squad? When you see these smelly fishes, obviously Vegas knows what they're talking about. What does that usually mean?
Well, I mean, it's to each their own. I don't know. The way my process is I put a number on every single game, and if the number is off, I bet it. That's the beautiful thing. If you think these numbers are terrible, it's college football. It's a big market. You can get down hundreds of thousands of dollars. So if you think something is wrong, go out and prove it. To me, though, what I think is the disconnect, and when I hear people say things like that, and you kind of mentioned it, I think it's people putting too much stock in a record. I know ultimately this is wins and losses. What matters, as far as evaluating teams for the playoffs, I think results have to matter. But if you talk about what people are pouring their money into, what's shaping the market, it's how these teams are playing on a per play basis, on a per drive basis, and the results can be really noisy. I mean, BYU undefeated, but they've gotten lucky in so many games. They're you look at their underlying statistical profile. I mean, they've had a good year. They've been better than I've ever thought, but, probably more in like the 30s range. Probably a fair record would be more in the 5-3 range. So it's no surprise to me that they're not necessarily getting the respect for that undefeated record. And then, we have a good example just from the games you've brought up of the flip side. Kansas has been played really great on a per play basis. They have found the most ridiculous ways to lose games this year, time and time again. I think maybe it was going into last week or 2 weeks. They'd either be 7-1 or 8-0 if the game was just 2 minutes shorter. They've just blown so many games at the end. And, typically there are a lot more predictive measures than scores at the end of the day. I mean, when you keep losing these games 30-28 or 31-27, but you're outgaining the opponent, you're having bad fumble luck. There's just a lot of noise that usually gets evened out. But once again, I'm saying if you disagree, you've got some opportunities to make some big money here. But yeah, I'd say the biggest thing is just don't look at the records too much because there's more than records that are shaping these betting markets.
We love SEC football. Of course, 3 of us are in the SEC in cases out there in Vegas, holding it all together with the ropes. And of course, we also talk about some pros, some pro picks, our best bets, some dogs coming up here by the end of the show. And we're going to jump right in because I think 2 of the biggest games in the SEC, obviously. Let's start with Alabama, LSU, Kai. Alabama going to LSU. We know how it is on Saturday nights. You and I were having a discussion before we started the show. Right now, I'd take Nussmeier over Milroe if I had a starting quarterback. I think he's been very, very consistent throughout the year. And here they are, Kelly, 20-11-1 in his college career at Notre Dame and LSU when he's got extra time to prepare. Is LSU going to knock Alabama out of the playoffs this weekend?
Death Valley. I mean, that's a really difficult place to play, Baton Rouge, at night. I don't read as much as a lot of people do into Alabama's win over a beat up, banged up Missouri team with the rest. I don't know that DeBoer or Brian Kelly has really proved themselves. I really kind of like the under in the first half. I think they're going to fill each other out, and then I like the over for the game. In that one, I don't really have a feel on the side because I don't. Again, and we can say this about just about any game, but you don't know which Alabama team is going to show up, which LSU team is going to show up. But I do want to say one thing before we move on. With college football, and I get that, but anybody looking at our plays, we do have the master hockey aficionado picker right here. Case's hockey picks are freaking
and
incredible.
If you know what you're doing, man, it's like taking candy from a baby early in the season. It really is. And your numbers have been amazing. Kip, you're doing the starting lineup. I was off this week with Legend, who, of course, goes to his Legend Cave. He's the biggest Alabama fan. First of all, what did he say about this LSU game? And then I'd love to get your expertise on what you believe is going to happen in Death Valley Saturday night.
He's nervous. Usually he's ultra confident and he's trying to exude that, but he is concerned. He's said about 5 times to me in our kind of pre-talk about what we're going to cover. He said, I'm just going to be begging Kalen DeBoer, and he calls him Kevin. Derisively. I don't know why. I've corrected him, but he still insists on calling him Kevin. Maybe he's got to win a championship before he'll call him by his real name. But he says, please don't make me have an irrelevant Thanksgiving. I can't have Alabama out of it by Thanksgiving. So I think he's pretty nervous. He doesn't really brashly make any kind of predictions. So from the Legend standpoint, I think he usually is a pretty good reflection of Tide Nation, and they know this is it. They dropped this game, and they're in more precarious position than LSU is. People say, well, it's an elimination game. Well, it might be an elimination game it is an elimination game for Alabama because they would have 3 conference losses that would take away any opportunity they had to get to Atlanta. And it would also be a 3rd loss that I just don't think is going to earn anybody. I don't think there's going to be a 3-loss team in this playoff. Alabama was served well last week with some chaos. Some of the undefeateds got knocked out, which is what they needed to happen. But I think they have to win this game. But remember, though, LSU only has they're one of the teams in a 5-way tie now for first place in the SEC because only one of their losses is in the conference. So the stakes are even higher for Alabama, which is kind of the reason I think that they're going to eventually prevail here. LSU has done 2 Houdini escapes to avoid losses at South Carolina, where they trailed 17-0 early and came back and won 41-37. And the other was the Ole Miss game, where Ole Miss for 3.5 quarters had control of the game, but lost Trey Harris, and Jackson Dart was kind of lost to the end, was just flinging it around. Ole Miss did a bad job of bringing that one to the house. That's another game they should have lost. So in my mind, LSU should have 4 losses. I think they're going to get their 3rd one on Saturday night.
I think Nussmeier will have some time to throw the football case. I know that Dellinger's out there at offensive guard. That may play into whether he's going to have the protection he needs. But what kind of number did you put on this game?
Yeah, great question. I ended up betting this game, and I probably shouldn't have if I was being super disciplined. I made it 3 at the beginning of the week. Now, the first number I make is just kind of off the cuff. I'm not really diving into things. Then my process is the next morning I filter in a lot more of the data, some other rating systems. Then I came out with 4. So because of that, I ended up betting Alabama -2.5. I do agree with Kip. As you've probably seen week in and week out on the show, I'm skeptical of LSU this year. I actually agree with you, Tony, that I do think I like Nussmeier better than Jalen Milroe, but the rest of the roster, to me, it's just Alabama by a mile. I don't think this is one of the better Tigers rosters we've seen. You cannot convince me in a million years that they deserve to win that Ole Miss game. I feel like they got a boost from that. I think that was just totally blown in-game situation by Ole Miss. So again, I made it basically right in line with the market, but I like Alabama coming off a bye week too. I get you can make the argument that Brian Kelly's going to make the most of it, but I think we talked about on the show too. I was kind of with the speculation that Milroe was a little beat up after all the hits he'd taken. I don't think he was quite right these last few weeks. I think the week off for him is big, and I mean, Kalen DeBoer has been great in these spots throughout his career when he has extra time to prepare too. So coaching wise, I don't really give an edge one way or the other, and I just like Alabama's personnel better. So Alabama -2.5. probably not one of my top 20 plays of the week. Like I said, big game. I probably just should have stayed away, but I lean the Tide a little bit.
We'll get to those big plays coming up in a few minutes. Yeah, and even Milroe didn't look good in the first half against Missouri. I mean, he just didn't look like he could find himself, and obviously they won by 34 points. The other thing is interesting too, and I wanted to get Case's thoughts on this before we move to the Ole Miss Georgia game. Kai and I were talking. How often do you not play a game because you just don't trust the coach? A lot of people just don't trust Brian Kelly. I know he's 20-11-1, 20-11-1 against the spread when he's got time to prepare for games, but a lot of people just don't trust Lane Kiffin either.
I mean, I could probably do more of that. I feel like I'm more stubborn and usually feel like I can factor into the numbers, thoughts on coaches. But, there are situations where it's just like this team is so poorly coached and week after week they look so bad that I'll stay away. I'll say personally, I think both those guys, and you can nitpick, and I'm not saying they've been perfect, but I think both those guys are on a high enough level where if I really care about a game, I'll bet on it, not have concerns about them. But you get down to some of these like group of 5 games. And I don't know, even probably another coming to mind off the top of my head, but there are some coaches I'm very skeptical of. And that can be like a tiebreaker, so to speak, if you're close on a game, but then you look and go, oh, it's Jason Candle from Toledo. Sorry to pick on one guy, but I just think he has the most talent in the MAC every year, and they have like 2 titles because I just think they mismanage Chuck Martin from Miami of Ohio is another guy I don't trust in the MAC. Sometimes that does come into mind.
Butch Jones. Go to K4Wins.com, K4Wins.com. It does that. It wins at a pretty good clip. That's 64% every single year. Kai, I know you've got one side you absolutely love in this Georgia Ole Miss game. It's Carson versus Dart. What you like?
What's crazy is if you think about it, Beck, just like Milroe's been way up there in the Heisman and all these different things. I just think Carson Beck has looked off for the last few weeks. Jackson Dart just looked great last week. I don't put a lot of stock in that. I don't think Carson Beck's that great. Jackson Dart's going to be missing Paris and Harris, running back and his best wide receiver of this weekend. Georgia in the trenches. And I think Lane Kiffin and his analytics is going to screw the game up. Analytics, whatever. I think Georgia's a better road team, and I know they lost, earlier in the year, but I think they're better on the road necessarily than at home for some reason. I remember calling Kirby smart, Kirby dumb, when he faked that punt against Alabama where everybody in the world knew he was faking it. And he called timeout.
Justin Fields was on the field.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, what are you doing? But I just think Lane Kiffin will make one more dumb mistake than Kirby, and Georgia wins. At least one more.
Kip, it's amazing the numbers that Kirby Smart has. He is great in big games, and he's played a ton. 44 games he's played against ranked opponents. He's 29-15 against the spread in those 44 games in his short coaching career, of course, at Georgia. Who do you like in this game?
Well, I like Georgia if they can establish the run. Ole Miss has a lot of high dollar bought and paid for defensive talent, especially on the front line. Georgia has had a real inability to run the ball because their running back core has been damaged from day one. Trevor Etienne is supposed to play, supposedly no damage to his ribs, just bruising. And according to Kirby in his press conference, it's just a pain threshold thing, and they think he's going to be all right. The freshman Frazier from California has been a godsend for them. And a walk-on freshman, a 5-year guy, Cash Jones, has stepped up and become a real cult figure. So, but the back situation, they were supposed to have Roderick Robinson, a huge recruit from California who had turf toe at the beginning of the year. Every week you read the injury updates, still out. I didn't know turf toe was a fatal disease, but apparently it is because he's not been heard from or talked about since the beginning of the season. He was a big key to their running core. Their receivers are down with a couple of off-field incidents. Ra Thomas and Young, the transfer from Miami, who just had the charges dropped against him this week, but he's still not reinstated. He was accused of shaking up his pregnant girlfriend when actually the police report said he hid in the bathroom the whole time to avoid getting accused of such things. Anyway, that's off the subject. There's a receiver core. I'm telling you, Carson Beck's biggest problem this year is guys not running the right routes, him thinking he can make any throw, and the absence of Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey, who are both the respective leading receivers on their NFL teams. That's 2 big losses, particularly a guy like McConkey, who was maybe the best route runner that Georgia's had in a number of years. So their offensive deficiencies have been obvious. obvious, but they still have enough weapons that they can, if Dylan Bell can step up and Dominic Lovett, they've still got some good receivers. I sent a text to Mike Bobo last week that the tight end is an eligible receiver. I think they had completely forgotten about their good core of tight ends. I think if Georgia plays anywhere near like they did at Austin against Texas, they're better than Ole Miss. But this is a tough spot. Ole Miss is understanding. You talk about an elimination game. This is absolutely one for them. So the incentive is going to be overflowing for the Rebels. But Georgia wants to get to Atlanta, and they got to have this one too. This is a dead toss-up. I would lean Georgia, but I would certainly never put anything of value on this game. I'm just going to sit back and watch it.
That game will be on ABC 3340. You can watch that in the 3 hosted games after the starting lineup is on from 10:30 to 11 o'clock here locally, ABC 3340. Case, what does Vegas say about this big SEC twist?
Well, I guess I'm the dissenter here because, to be honest, I like Ole Miss in this game. I'm kicking myself because I was in a state with these big national sports books for the Raiders game last week in Ohio, and this opened 3.5, and I can't believe I didn't bet 3.5. That was gone right away. I did bet some Ole Miss +3 and some money line. Now there is a way this whole thing goes awry, and really money wise, it's kind of stayed steady throughout the whole week. I know we've had some dips to 2.5, back to 3. Seems like there's interest on both sides. However, there's one thing that I think is keeping it a little more inflated that I'm not so bought in that should, and that's the injury report. You guys did a good job talking about a lot of the things going on there. But to me, Lane Kiffin has been complaining about having to do this injury report all year. It's like his pet. It's like his pet peeve. Yeah. He just talks about time and time again. Now he's listed the entire team basically on the injury report. I don't buy anything Ole Miss is saying. I think there's some gamesmanship here, and I think if they're close to 100% healthy, which I personally think they are going to be, I don't buy anything he's saying. I think that we go back to results versus process. I think on a per play and a per drive basis, Ole Miss has been a better team than Georgia this year. Now, I know they lost 2 games. Let's look at those games. They lost by 6 total points to Kentucky and LSU. I already covered the LSU game. I think they totally blew the end game. They were the better team there. Against Kentucky, they missed, I think, a couple field goals. They had 2 yards per play advantage. I think you play that game 100 times, Ole Miss wins 95 of them. I actually think Georgia looked much worse against Kentucky than Ole Miss did. So if these injuries are real and Ole Miss is missing half of its starters or whatever, maybe Georgia just trucks them. I'm pretty surprised to be in this situation because I thought Georgia was going to be way better than everyone this year. But you take away the first half against Texas and the second half against Clemson, and I think it's just runaway. Ole Miss has been the better team this year, so I like Ole Miss as an underdog this week.
Well, Lane Kiffin.
I mean, if they're not real injuries, they'll just fake them anyway during the game.
Well,
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
exactly. As soon as you start running, run up. Yeah, as soon as you start running plays quickly, they're going to go ahead and get banged up. I will say this: if you want to look at injury reports, go look at LSU. They've got 16 guys on their injury report right now. So if you're one of these people that looks at injury reports, you're taking Bama all day long because LSU looks like a triage. I mean, it is an absolute mess, although most of those players have a big P next to their name as improbable. All right, let's run around the horn here. This is the part I love, our best bets of the weekend. Dogs, whatever you got. Let's start in the top left-hand corner. Kai, what do you like? What's jumping out at you, man?
You know, most of the games that I like, we're not going to talk about. And they're not in the SEC. I mean,
that's okay.
Colorado and Texas Tech. I think there's going to be a lot of points in that game. Mm-hmm. I think Pitt bounces back big this week against Virginia, and I know a lot of people that disagree with that. I like them over their team total. One of the hardest places, in the country to play is Utah. I still like BYU in that game, but I'm wondering why the line opened at 5 and now it's 2.5. Mm-hmm. That one makes me not want to bet it, but I do think BYU gets over their team total of 21. I really do in that game. Utah, opening up their quarterback competition again this week just kind of makes me, wonder. I think BYU is the better team. Maybe they're not an undefeated team, but I think they're the better team. So those are there. I for some reason, I don't know why, I like Purdue +38 against Ohio State. An early game, Ohio State just coming off of a big game. So, I kind of like that. And if Haynes King's not playing for Georgia Tech, how in the world do you not take, Miami, even though it's come down from 11 to 10.5, maybe get it at 10, kind of like that with their over the team total. And I think Indiana and Kurt Sig, I think they're going to beat a Michigan team that really ran it up on them last year, 52-7. has beat them 112-24 their last three. So that's another one that I really like at. And my biggest prediction is there will not be any teams that have not trailed this year after this week. Army will trail this week at some point.
Boy, man,
if not overall.
Man, Harbaugh leaves Michigan, and I mean, they've just absolutely full. I mean, you can count on this team to pretty much be favored by 20 points against everybody when Harbaugh is there, and they're catching 13.5 against an undefeated Indiana squad. Kip, what you like this weekend? What's jumping out at you?
Well, everything Kai just said, I'm on the opposite side.
There you go.
I don't know how we balance that out. I like Michigan at Indiana because Indiana, I looked at their schedule again today because I wanted to confirm what I already knew. They have played the weakest schedule imaginable. The 5 best teams in the Big Ten, they don't play any of them this year until they go to Ohio State next week. Indiana is a number 8 team. They've got dreams of big playoff success. Michigan is a dumpster fire. They have no offense, a bad quarterback. They still have some pieces on defense. They're getting 2 touchdowns in a game that Indiana has to be looking ahead to the trip to Columbus next week. Michigan would lose their 5th game of the year if they drop this one. I just think this is going to be a grim struggle for Indiana because this is the first team that's even had one good side of the ball they've played. Indiana's played Florida International and Western Michigan and all of the dredges, Maryland and Northwestern and UCLA, all of the bottom feeders in the Big Ten. They do get to play Purdue in 2 weeks, but I just don't think this team's legitimate. Let's find out tomorrow. I also, and I don't feel as strongly about this one, but Virginia is one of the most intriguing teams in the country. They might be a wrecking ball because their next 4 games, starting with Pitt tomorrow, who's still in the conversation. Certainly anybody who gets to their conference championship game has a chance to get through that and get a bye into the first round in the top 4 seeds. Virginia starts this flurry of their last 4 games tomorrow with Pittsburgh. Then next week they play Notre Dame. The following week SMU, and the last week Virginia Tech, who's still on the periphery of being alive. They're going to be the great agitator in the mix here down the stretch. I think Virginia takes down at least one of those teams, maybe 2. I don't think this is a great team, but they just got such a good opportunity, and a team that's 500 has a lot to play for when they're going to have a big say-so on who advances. So I'm going to start by taking the 7.5 tomorrow against Pitt, who may be a little shaken after getting boat raced by SMU over the weekend. I like that one. Let's see. I've also got I give all the credit in the world to Vanderbilt. Good job, Commodores. You're bowl eligible. You've reached your goal. But, they've just played flawlessly all year and gotten the right plays at the right time. I think this South Carolina team is on a roll. I loved them last week. They blew away undefeated in the conference, Texas A&M. They go to Nashville. I think the magic train ride for Vanderbilt is they're getting 3 here as a home team. But I think Carolina's playing at such a high level. I love the Gamecocks in Nashville.
Okay, good stuff. I'm going to give mine first because I think the man who knows everything about what's going on usually looks at all of our plays and he can kind of pick where he's going to go.
The anchor man.
The anchor man. Yeah, I'm going to go over the other side too against BYU. I'm going against the 8-0 squad. They are 7-1 against the spread. Utah won their first 4 ball games. They did lose their last 4 ball games. They are 2-6 against the spread, but they lost those 4 ball games by 1 scores. Of course, the over-under on that game, by the way, 40. And whenever I see a 40, when I see anything in the 40s, I love to take the overs. When I see a 40 in a game like this, and by the way, Utah is 1-7 in over-unders, 1-7 over-unders. So they're not going to score. It's going to be a muddy game. It's going to be an ugly game. I think Utah's cover 1D is going to give them all kinds of problems. Whittingham is 27-16 as a dog of 4 points or less in his tenure there at Utah. I'm going to take Utah plus the 4. I'm going to go, and I did a show this past week. It was the first show we did in 6 weeks when Trent Dilfer actually came in as a winner. I love what Kitten is doing. He had 400 and something yards, 5 touchdowns for the Blazers. I think the offense is back. There's a reason why they got a 6-3 independent UConn coming into town, scoring 33 points a game. Nick Evers, their quarterback's only completing 52% of his passes. The last 4 November games, UAB was at home as an underdog. Those games flew over by 13.5 points per ball game. So first of all, I'm going to take the over 55 all day. If it was anything under 60, I was all over this game. So I think UAB's offense is back, and I'm going to take UAB now. It's up to 7. I've been waiting for it to jump up to 7. I love UAB, although they're not very good. I think they're 2-5 against the spread last 7 games, an underdog at Protective. I'm going to take UAB plus the 7. I also like Georgia minus the 2.5. We mentioned that a little bit earlier in the show. A couple other games. I do think the Army game is really interesting. An interesting number there. Army, since 2005, has only covered 25% of the time when they're favored by a field goal or a touchdown if you're into trends. And of course, they're giving up a few points there to North Texas, which I think is very interesting. And I also think that Greg Schiano's doing a pretty decent job. There's a reason why he went back to Rutgers. I think he's comfortable there. I think they like him. I think he's a lifetime guy there. He's 12-5-1 against the spread when he's had 10 or more days to prepare, and they're catching 6. If you can get it up to 7 against Minnesota, I wouldn't play it unless you get to 7. But I like Rutgers plus the 7 there if you can buy it up to that. Case, what do you think?
Yeah, I will say we will probably do some regression after for like 3 weeks. I disagreed with every game Kip gave out. Now I feel like I'm really lockstep with him this week. A lot of what he said.
All right.
My biggest bet of the week, I don't think you can make it now, unfortunately, but South Carolina minus 1.5, I just smashed. I thought that was a terrible opener. All the way up to 5.5 now, which to be honest, I wouldn't play because I feel like Vanderbilt in these close games, they kind of have something going on there. I will say, though, this is something we've talked about on the show before. I'm looking at the board right now. Some places have just not adjusted the money line enough. South Carolina minus 190 on the money line. You do the math to a 5.5-point favorite. That's like almost 220. So wow. I know probably people don't like laying minus 190, but I am sure that's a good bet. Maybe if you're a parlay guy, find somebody to parlay them with. But South Carolina minus 190 on the underline. I promise that's a better bet than minus 5.5. I'd be shocked if they lost that game. I guess sticking with the big games, I know that's what people like to talk about. I never expected to be in this position. I don't know if it was on this show. I think it might have just been a conversation with Kip. I said there were 10 teams that could win the Big 12 coming into the year, and Colorado was not one of them. I was dead wrong because I think Colorado is winning the Big 12. I've been betting them every week. I think they're the best team in the conference, and I think they're way better than Texas Tech. I think they smoked Texas Tech in this game. I bet 3. It's now 4. So obviously you're not getting the best of the number, but I still think that's fine. I think Colorado wins by at least a touchdown here. I just think, they probably have 7 guys that are going to get drafted. And in the Big 12 this year, there's just no other teams with that high level of talent. They've at least got a passable offensive line now. Maybe this is the week it blows up on me, but coming off a bye week, I like Colorado. In that game, trying to think of some other ones you guys touched. I probably couldn't bet it now, but I was part of the Utah +5 money. I jumped on that. These games are just always close. I think should be one of the lowest scoring games of the week. Like you said, a total of 40. I didn't even realize it had gotten that low. I think it's going to be tight, probably come down to a field goal either way. So I would still lean Utah there. A little bit tougher sell at 3, but +5. I'm certainly on Utah. Just a couple more, I guess, to top of soft games we haven't talked about. I like UCF going to Arizona State. I guess if you're making a narrative out of this, kind of the same situation as Vanderbilt. Arizona State's supposed to be terrible, clinched bowl eligibility. Everyone's so happy. Meanwhile, UCF has found something with this freshman quarterback they've thrown in. They were trotting KJ Jefferson and Ja'Cory Brown out there, which I understand. They kind of both had success before, but they could just never get into the rhythm. Now they got this Rizek kid who's just been absolutely electric. Even from the second half of the BYU game on, they've been great. So an underdog at Arizona State who might be without Cam Scadaboo, who's been the engine of them. I like UCF there. And I know they're a favorite now. I bet them as an underdog, but I just think Missouri is awful without Brady Cook. And I think Oklahoma, since the offensive coordinator switch, has been much better. I still think this Oklahoma roster, I know you guys hate this team. I've heard a lot of you.
They're 5-4. They've saved their season.
Yeah, I think Oklahoma wins this game. So as long as you can get 3 or less, I would take Oklahoma as a short favorite still.
All right.
Missouri's done.
Yeah. You mentioned UCF too. 12-2 against the spread as a short dog the last 10 seasons. When they're a short dog, when they love to play close ball games. All right. We have a few minutes left. We haven't even looked at Sunday as far as an NFL. We're primarily a college football game, but anything you guys jump out to you in the National Football League getting in on a week? I can't believe it's week 10 in the National Football League already. The season's going to be over before you know it. So just sponge it and take it all you got. Anyone got any NFL action?
I've only got one game. I'll throw it out there because I've looked several times, and boy, I think it's a tough week. We'll see what Case thinks, but I've watched Atlanta Falcons football for 5 decades. Every time you say, wow, the Falcons really got it together, they got it all going their way. New Orleans fires their coach this week. They had their car back. This is a prime time perfect spot where the Falcons will fall flat on their face in the Superdome. They're a 4-point favorite. Nonsense. Take the Saints all day long.
I love it. I love it. Anyone else?
I mean,
Go
over.
ahead.
Yeah.
No, go
I
ahead.
guess it's the theme of the show is me agreeing with Kip. I don't know if it's my favorite play of the week, but you guys might have seen the stat. It was going around a lot. New Orleans had like a 200-yard advantage and +3 in turnovers last week. The previous I think it was like 285 teams that had been in that situation were 285-0. They were the first team to lose a game like that. So I think this is a reaction to just a crazy result last week that should have never happened. They're having an interim coach step in. Usually there's a bump from an interim coach. I think 3.5's way too many. So I do like the Saints +3.5. Another dog I kind of like. I like the Jets off extra rest on Thursday Night Football. I've heard so many people showering the Cardinals with praise. You got my wheels turning about this with your great early question, Tony, about kind of results versus the underlying numbers. I just feel like the Cardinals have overachieved this year. I mean, they're 5-4, but 2 of their wins were like kind of bizarre, never should have happened. Everyone's down on the Jets, which I get. I don't love the Jets either, but extra rest, it seems like some things kind of came together in that Thursday night game. I kind of like them as well.
Okay, Kai, you got anything?
I like the over in that Atlanta game. I'm not really on any side. I think it's probably going to stay inside that number. I really like Tampa Bay to go over their team total against San Francisco. Baker Mayfield just throwing it to whoever. It's only 21 points. I think they'll get to at least 24. And contrarian, I like Minnesota to get over their team total 26 against Jacksonville. And I would probably take Tampa Bay if I could get them +7.5. I think it's 6.5 right now. I'm not going to buy a full point to get a win, but if I could get to 7.5, I would definitely hop there. And call me crazy, Cooper Rush at quarterback for Dallas, getting 7.5. I might do it at Philly. It's not Dak screwing the game up, so who knows?
That's true. K4Wins.com, K4wins.com. Check out the website. Everything's free. Check it out. And, of course, all of our plays. If you missed the show, please watch it, man. It's fantastic. It's available on TKR, Tony Kurre Radio, on every major indice. All you got to do is find TKR, find K4Wins. You can watch all of our shows. Everything's documented. We're at 64% of the year. We're doing fantastic. Gentlemen, until next week, thank you so much.
Go Vols.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.